that it is fine. That one is more interesting and more important for we to understand. Well, basically, you can see here that there are two individuals. This one has obviously a normal body weight, and that one is obviously overweight or obese. So let's start with the normal, healthy individual. So there are two things that you will have to understand and to remember, and which I did not mention yesterday. First, leptin actually has the ability to inhibit biosynthesis and the release of insulin by the pancreatic beta cells. So that is the first thing that you will have to remember. And why is it so? And just think, leptin is a molecular signal to the brain stating that, well, please do not eat anymore because we do have enough storage. And insulin, actually, well, insulin is used when you have a lot of food coming in, and especially a lot of glucose or carbohydrate. And therefore, if the brain signal to our human body not to eat anymore, and if you do not eat anymore, you do not need insulin, because insulin is only useful when you have hyperglycemia, and therefore you want to reduce the blood level of glucose. If you anticipate that you will not eat anymore, there will be no hyperglycemia, and therefore insulin is not needed anymore. So that is how people explain the inhibitory effect of leptin on insulin synthesis and secretion in anticipation of the no need of insulin when you are not eating. And by contrast, insulin stimulates leptin secretion from adipose tissue. And that is the second thing that you will have to understand and to remember. To remember first and to understand then. Why does insulin will stimulate leptin secretion from adipose tissue? Because insulin is there when you have a lot of food coming in. And in anticipation of to tell the hypothalamus that because the food is coming in, so at some stage you will not need to eat anymore. And you remember that leptin and insulin, between the two, leptin is more effective to stop the feeling, the sensation of hunger than insulin. So insulin will start by triggering the release of leptin from adipose tissue. And then leptin can go to the brain and to signal to stop eating. And that is how things work. In a normal person, and you just remember that leptin inhibits insulin secretion in anticipation of the fact that we are not, after the meal, we will stop eating. And insulin will trigger the secretion of leptin in anticipation that, well, you will have to signal to the brain in order to start thinking of stopping eating. And because you now fully realize that our food intake behavior is actually regulated by the aqueous nucleus located in the hypothalamus. And the things with overweighting or of obesity is a we call that leptin resistance, but we can say that by the fact that our brain does not sense correctly the level of leptin. And we have seen that the fact is we have a lot of leptin in the periphery, but because of this transporter system, leptin does not go into the brain anymore. In some cases, leptin can go into the brain, but there is a lack of signalization with an abnormal receptor. But in all cases, the hypothalamus, just as if hypothalamus has become uh, uh, does not hear very well the information sent by the periphery. So in that case, because leptin does not uh, clearly sense the um, the situation in terms of fat storage in the periphery, leptin will still let the hunger system being stimulated, and people will continue to eat despite the fact that they already have enough storage in the peripheral tissue, in the fat tissue, and in the other organs. And because they have a lot of storage, the level of glucose in the blood will increase, and that level of the blood will increase. That will cause the hyperinsulinemia, more secretion of insulin, and that will eventually end up with the resistance to insulin, and that will cause diabetes. So that is how people with leptin resistance is also a cause of overeating and therefore diabetes in the type 2 diabetes. So this is how we can see things, and there is another explanation which is not represented here, but what that I can share that with you is in some person, in some people, you have normal transport system and everything is rather normal, but that is the thing is the fat that will cause the increase in leptin is actually the fat that will come from meat. And when you have fat coming from meat, you will increase fat storage in the fat tissue, therefore increasing the synthesis of leptin and therefore signaling to the brain to stop eating. Now, with the modern way of living, you can increase the food intake and increase the energy intake, not with meat, but what is the cause of, what is the most common cause of increased energy? That is not with meat. That will be with carbohydrates. So when you are eating a lot of sugar, a lot of meal with sugar, cakes, all the things that we are drinking, Coke, etc. That will increase the energy storage. But this energy storage does not come directly from fat coming from the meat. And during the whole evolution, we have manufactured this mechanism to regulate our food intake behavior, and that mechanism mainly relies on the fat coming from the real fat, that is the fat that you can find in the meat, and not the fat that has been transformed from carbohydrate, as we have seen in the previous lecture. And that is also the way explaining why people are still are still hungry, despite the fact that they do have enough storage in energy in the tissue. So Those are the two mechanisms explaining why uh, the two mechanisms that all two are related to what we have called the leptin resistance syndrome, and the two mechanisms explaining why people, despite the fact that they have enough storage in their body, are still hungry, and therefore they still have the need of eating more and more. And the last and final explanation is if you have more fat storage, all those are living cells. And those living cells do need energy to survive. And also the evolution has taught us that all cells are considered equal. The brain does not have the capacity to say that, well, neurons and cardiac myocyte or cells in the respiration system are noble cells, and therefore they will have to preserve, and the other one, just like the fat, etc., are cells which are not important, that we will have to get rid of. For our human body, all cells are considered equal. And therefore, if you have more cells, whatever the type, in your body, all those cells will need to be fed, and then in order to survive. And the more you have, well, the more demanding those cells will be. And therefore, people with a lot of cells are people who need a lot of energy, irrespective of the fact that those cells are muscle cells, which are very important for sportsmen, or simply fat cells. Fat cells are just important for us to store. But if we have enough storage, we do not have to store them anymore. But the hypothalamus does not understand that, and therefore they will stimulate eating in order to nourish, to feed those cells. So those are basically the things that I wanted to share with you in terms of food